Hello YouTube, thank you for clicking on this video, and shout out to Big Daddy Algorithm for pimping it out to you. My name is Megan and welcome to my channel. So coming at you today with a thrift flip video. This is a project that I've been wanting to do for a while. Every year at Christmas time, I make like a really epic dress. A couple years ago, I did like a full-on Edwardian ball gown. And then last year I did like a big poofy pink ball skirt that I wore with this like beautiful green cashmere sweater. This year, I'm continuing on my green theme. So I was browsing in a thrift shop in Toronto like a few months ago, and I came across this absolutely stunning green taffeta ball gown with like the poofiest skirt, and it was $7, like legit $7. I will show you the price tag if you don't believe me. So obviously I bought it. It was like 5 sizes too big, but I thought to myself, you know what, I can sew, I can just make this fit me. So I thought it would be a super fun little thrift flip to do. So I'm gonna walk you through my process doing that. It probably won't be like as chaotic as my last like sewing tutorial because one, I actually left myself enough time to like do it properly and to like really plan ahead what I'm going to be doing. And two, I actually have like a method in my head of how I'm going to go about this. So I'm going to add some boning and some structure to the bodice. I'm going to like gather the skirt up in the back, make it look a little bit poofier, and just give it like a corset style top. So I will show you guys all of that in like the footage in the rest of this video. But basically I wanted to film this and post it because I've had like a lot of people ask me about thrift flips. I've been doing a ton of them this past summer. Like that's basically all I've been doing is thrift flips. I've had a bunch of people like ask me to show them how to like flip certain things. I mean, like obviously not all of you are going to be flipping ball gowns, but I can still take like the basic principles of what I'm going to be doing and apply it to like anything that you want to flip. So this project won't actually require any drafting. So it's not that kind of a tutorial, but basically what I want to show you is how to look at something that's maybe the wrong size. Maybe you hate the shape of it, but you love the fabric that it's made out of, and take that garment, see the potential in it, and then turn it into something new and beautiful and that fits you and your body perfectly. So, hopefully that's what you take away from this video. If not, I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of chaos in there somewhere because ADHD. So that's how we roll sometimes. So without further ado, there are T-7 weeks and counting until Christmas. So let's see if we can do this all by hand in that time. Let's go. Okay, so here is the dress. Also, this part is going to be filmed vertically because, again, with the mirror and like the short wall, and also now you can see the entire dress, whereas like if I flip the camera this way, it's just a lot harder. See what I mean? So y'all will have to deal with the vertical video. Sorry. So you can see how humongous this dress is on me. It's like probably 4 or 5 sizes too big, like not an exaggeration, but I just look at it and see so much potential. So, okay, what I think I'm going to do is, if you can see like this line here, I'm going to actually get rid of this like mesh part, and I'm going to get rid of the sleeves also. Those are just going to go. And it's going to be sleeveless. I'm also going to take off these like applique bits because I have another applique that I want to add to it. I probably will add these back on, but just like on a different place on the gown. But yeah, first order of business is I'm going to have to take this apart. So take these parts off. Then I'm going to have to take this tulle part off because I want this to be strapless. So if you can see like right here, focus camera, there we go. So you can see this line right here. This is going to be like the top. And then I'm gonna have to take in the bodice like so much. There's so much fabric back here that I don't need, but I think I'm gonna actually take it out of the back panel, which I'll show you in a minute. There is the waist seam. I would like to keep that in. But if you see, like, this is why I thought the dress had so much potential, because look, if I actually put it to like what the right size is, you can sort of see what it's gonna look like when the mesh part is gone and when the top is taken in. Like it has a really nice shape to it when it fits properly. So I'm also gonna add, I think, some boning into the bodice. I have just like in my stash, I have a bunch of like whale bones. So, and I use that for like historical corset projects. And I just like, it's like one of those things that I always have in my stash because I use it all the time. So I definitely have enough. So I'm gonna add boning to these 2 front seams. I think I'm also gonna add like some corset style boning around the side. And what I can do is like, since I'm taking so much fabric out of the back of this dress, I can actually use that extra fabric as like casing for the bones and add that to the inside of the bodice so that I don't waste any fabric. It's always a win with like thrift upcycles when you don't actually waste any of the fabric and you can like reuse it in other parts of the garment. So yeah, I like the length. I'm going to keep the length. When I take the bodice in, it is going to have like a lot of extra skirt here. So what I'm going to do is all of that extra skirt, I'm going to gather it into the back, which will make the skirt like poof out and almost look like it has a little bit of a bustle. So that's the plan. But just wanted you guys to see like what I'm working with here and how this is going to transform. So the first thing I'm doing is removing the golden applique bits from the bodice so that I can start to separate out all of the rest of the things that need to come off of this dress. Next, I'm just removing the mesh sleeves and also the top of the bodice so that I will just be left with that strapless piece, and then we can just go from there.
Bells on bobtail ring, making spirits bright. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing song tonight.
Alright, I've removed the mesh part and the applique, and I also took out the zipper, which is why I'm holding the dress like this, because it does not close right now, and I'm trying really hard not to flash you all. So for those of you who are just getting started with like making your own clothes or with upcycling thrifted clothes, crap. See what I mean? The first thing you want to do always when taking your measurements is to find out where your waist is and find out if you're long-waisted, short-waisted, or like more proportional. So for me, I'm really short-waisted. Like my waist is right here and my legs start here. So like my whole body is legs. I'm just all leg. So while that's nice in terms of like beauty standards, it sucks when making clothing because most like corsets and corset tops are actually made for people with longer waists, and the longer your waist is, the better you're going to look in a corset. So for a top like this, it actually would be a lot better to be long-waisted or at least proportional, but it is what it is. Since my waist is here and the waistline is actually here, I'm going to move the waistline up a bit. So I'm going to actually make this come down into a point at center front. So it's going to be, instead of like a horizontal bodice, it's going to have like a point here at center front, which will just like increase the corset look. And then I'm going to do a sweetheart neckline. So like this is the top of the boob cup. So I'm going to basically have it come along the lines of like where the boob cups are. And then we'll just put some boning underneath to like help support that. So, and then probably pat it out because I don't have enough boobage to like fill out this cup here. So we're gonna have to add some padding. We're gonna have to add some boning. We're gonna have to shorten the waist. And then obviously we're gonna have to take out a lot of fabric from the back. So that's the game plan. First thing I'm going to do is separate the top from the skirt so that we can work with the 2 pieces separately. And then I'm going to do the top, put in all the boning, do the structure. I'm going to move the zipper to the center back instead of at the side here. And then once I'm done the top, then I can just reattach the skirt. So that's my plan. I'm going to go detach this now and we can start actually like reconstructing this from the inside out. I forgot to mention in that last clip that the reason it's important to know where your waistline is if you're sewing, drafting, making your own clothes, upcycling clothes, or even just like trying to make a commercial pattern fit you, it's important to know where your waistline is because everything else should flow from there. So if you have like pants, for example, or a skirt, it should start at your natural waistline and then go down to the floor from there. You absolutely want it to start at your waist because if it doesn't, it's going to look like it doesn't fit you. So that's why you want to find out where your natural waist is. If you want, I can do like a short tutorial on how to do that. Actually, yeah, you know what? Let's do that. Okay, so if I'm back to my full length mirror here, basically your waist starts at the point where your body bends. So a good way to like find where your waistline is just kind of like bend over like this. And at the point where your torso bends, like that's where your waistline is. So it's hard to kind of see like just pull that up. Like, okay, if you're a woman or like have a woman's body, you can, there's like usually a little bit of a dip where your waist is, but not always. Like I'm pretty straight up and down. I don't have like a lot of hip going on here. So for me, like it helps to kind of just bend and find where your waistline is. So for me, it's like right here. And as you can see, like that's most of my body. Like if I stand back, my waist starts like basically under my rib cage. So like most of my body is actually leg. I don't have much like torso. So some people, their waistline starts a bit lower. For some people, it's like even higher than mine. But knowing where your natural waistline is really, really important. So like, once again, if you need to find it, just like bend over, and at the point where your torso bends, that's where your waistline is. I hope that makes sense. I can definitely go into more detail about this later, but essentially that's how you find your waistline. If you're making a skirt or a dress, like you need to know that. All right, so now that we know how to find our waistlines, let's get back to this project. In order to reconstruct the bodice, I first have to detach it from the skirt, so I'm just going in with my seam ripper and carefully unpicking the stitches that hold the bodice and skirt together. I sped this up a lot for the sake of the video and your sanity, but all in, this process took about 20 minutes.
Drifted back and then we got upside. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey.
All right, so I've just separated the skirt from the bodice, and now I can actually work on the bodice piece separately. The skirt I'm going to deal with after I'm done the bodice part, because that's the part that's going to take like the most amount of work. So skirt, I'm just going to toss that aside for now, and I will pick that up again like towards the end of this project. But right now, you can see the bodice here all separate. So here's the front, and there's like the boob cups. And there's the back. So I'm going to take most of the fabric out of the back. So you can see the back is all just one piece, which is awesome. I'm going to make a cut down center front because I'm going to add the zipper back in at center front. And then I'm probably going to take the chunks out of center front here. So basically this is going to be a lot smaller. And I think the best way to do that is just by putting this on my body and pinning it together until it fits me, just like old Victorian dressmaker style, where you just pin the fabric on your body, make it fit, sew it down. So I think that's what we're gonna do. And then we're gonna add some boning in here, but first I need to get this to actually fit me. So I'm gonna go do that right now. All right, it is like 1 o'clock in the morning on a work night, so I gotta wrap this up and go to bed, but I just wanted to quickly film and show you the progress that I've made. So I basically have cut this into the shape that it's going to be. I cut the pointed front, I cut a bit of the sweetheart neckline in. Obviously I don't know if you can see the pen marks there, but I left a bit of room for seam allowance. So this is not like the final shape because all of this is going to end up getting tucked under and felled down. So when I actually do this hem, I'll film myself doing it and show you just so that you have an idea of like how to do a hem. So I think the next part in this construction process is that I'm going to treat this like a pair of 18th century stays, and I'm going to draw in some boning channels where I think it would make sense for the bones to go. So like here down center front, I want to do some diagonal boning here and here. And then of course I want to do a couple of bones on the seams here and then at center back right before I hit the zipper, and also on the other side. So I think it makes sense to do that. And then I'll just stitch the boning channels down. And as you can see, the dress already came with the lining. So basically what you do, for those of you who have never made 18th century stays before or know how they are constructed, what you do is you treat the outer fabric and the lining as one piece of fabric, and then you stitch the boning channels through both pieces of fabric, and then that creates like a channel where you can then slip the bones in between the lining and the outer fabric, and then the bones will just sit in there. So it's a super easy way to do boning. It doesn't require any casing. So I think I'm going to do it like that. And then, yeah, like I said, just sort of treat the rest of this construction as I would like an 18th century gown. I think that makes the most amount of sense. So I'm going to do that tomorrow because like I said, it's really late, but here you go. Just a quick update. Okay, so it is the next morning and I am on my lunch break. So I thought I'd just hop on here really quick and sort of show you what I meant with the stays thing last night when I was talking about it. So This is my pair of 18th century stays that I made about a year and a half ago now. And I think I am going to construct this bodice the same way that I constructed these stays. I think it just makes a lot of sense to do it that way. And I'm going to use like the same technique that I used on the stays on the bodice. So for those of you watching who have made 18th century stays before, you know the drill. For those of you who haven't, I'm just going to show you really quick what I mean by treating both the layers of fabric as one piece of fabric. So you can see on the other side here, what we've got is like, I have this green linen. So, okay, actually, okay, wait, forget that. Maybe I'm going to start over. Okay, so basically 18th century stays are made up of 3 layers of fabric. You have your outer layer of linen, like the front layer here, and then you have an interior layer of linen, which you can see here is like the green layer, and then you have your lining, which is also made of linen, which is this. So quick history lesson, in the 18th century, stays could not be washed because they were made with like whalebone here, which obviously can't be washed. And also people just didn't launder their clothes as much back then. So what you would do is you would wear like a linen shift over your body, and that would be the layer between like your skin and your clothes, and it would protect your clothes from getting dirty. And then you would wear your stays on top of your shift, and the stays would also have a linen lining. So the lining here is actually the very last part of the stays. So once you've constructed like everything here, the very, very last step is then you put in the lining, and it's tacked on. You can see, oh, if the camera will focus, it's tacked on with like really loose kind of felling stitches here. Which is the same stitch you use when you hem by hand, but in this case, it's like done really loosely. And, oh wait, here, you might be able to see it better here. If my camera will focus, yeah, so you can see the felling stitches here. They're tacked on really loosely, and that's done on purpose because when this lining gets like gross and dirty, it's meant to just be like unpicked and then either washed or thrown away and then sewn back in again. So that is how you keep the stays from getting like super disgusting when you can't actually wash them. So you can see the back stitching here that was done on the boning channels. And then if you flip it over to the other side, here's the other side of the stitches. These 2 layers of linen, the green and then like the beige linen on the outside, were cut, and then they were tacked together, and then they were stitched like the boning channels here. And they were just treated as one piece of fabric with the boning channels stitched right between them. And then when that's done, you insert the bones like in the channel, and then that's what sort of gives it that look. And you can see like these stays are meant to be like late 18th century. So they're fairly heavily boned, but like not as heavily boned as like stays from the early 18th century would have been, because they're meant to sort of flow a little bit more naturally with the curve of your body. So you can see like the boning gives it a lot of shape and a lot of structure. So that's kind of what I want for this bodice. Like I don't want it to be as heavily structured as this. Like you can see that the front of the stays like holds its shape even though there's no body in it. And you can see like how much shape these already have even when you're not even wearing them. And that's the point, because they're meant to like shape your body a certain way. I don't necessarily want that to be the case with this. I just want the boning channels to make the fabric stiff so that it doesn't like crumple in on itself like that when you wear it. So basically, I just want this bodice to be like stiff and smooth, and I want it to cinch my waist a little bit, but not as much as the stays. So I'm going to use the same technique that I used here on this bodice, and I'm going to treat the lining and the outer fabric as one layer. And then next step, right after this, I'm going to draw in the boning channels where I want them, and then I'm going to stitch them exactly the same way that I stitched these. So I'm sorry if that doesn't make a ton of sense right now. If you've never sewn stays before, that's probably really confusing, but I will show you what I'm doing so that if you also want to do this on one of your projects, you can just copy what I'm doing. Or if you want to like stitch a pair of your own stays, you can like apply the same technique. But basically I will film myself doing that so that you can see what the deal is. And hopefully this will make a lot more sense once you can actually see it, because I feel like I'm not making a ton of sense right now. Now that we have a plan for how this is going to be constructed, I'm going in with my heat erase pen and drawing in the lines for where I want the boning channels to be. I'm not too worried about marking up the fabric because these pen marks will disappear as soon as I iron them, and they're necessary because they also mark out the lines that I'm going to stitch over top of to create the boning channels. I decided to create 3 channels down the center front of the bodice to act as a sort of busk, which will smooth and flatten the torso and give it a nice structured silhouette. I also decided to add in a 3rd channel down each side to help support the waist and give the illusion of a more conical shape, similar to the ideal body shape of the late 18th century. I decided to add a couple more diagonal channels down center front as well, not for any structural purposes, but just to visually emphasize that point at center front. And also, when it comes to boning, the more the merrier. Innuendo intended. Alright, it is now the end of my workday and also pretty much dark outside, even though it's only 5 p.m. And I have the bodice here, and it actually occurred to me that before I stitch these boning channels, I actually should reinforce these cups. So what I did was I pinned another cup to this, and this is just gonna like pat it out a little bit more. And I did that on the other side, and I'm just gonna stitch a line down the center of each cup. And then I'm going to re-stitch this line as well on the inside, which should keep the cups from folding, because right now the cup on the inside is like very crumply. I think just from being folded in the thrift store where I found this, it's kind of lost its shape. So I need to like reinforce the shape of these. And by doing this line of stitches all over again, it's just going to reinforce that curve and help it keep its shape a little bit better. So I need to do that before I start stitching these boning channels, because if I did the boning channels first, it would be really, really hard to get in here to do what I need to do here. So gonna do this first, then gonna do the boning channels, and I will film myself doing both of those things just so that you can see how it's done. As always, when I hand sew, I'm using a number 10 sharp needle to do my stitching with. I always use these small needles when I sew because they make the tiniest stitches, which are almost invisible, and that's what you want when you hand sew. Since this is the first actual stitch I have put in this dress so far, I also want to make sure that the color of my thread matches the color of the fabric as closely as possible, so I'm using this emerald green polyester thread that seems to be a good fit. I'm not going to worry about being too neat and tidy with this part though, since the cups are going to get covered up by the fabric, so it doesn't matter if the stitches are visible or not. So I've got some stabilized boob cups here and here, and I have stitched down here just to reinforce that. You can see I didn't bother being terribly neat with those stitches because they're in the inside, so who cares, and they do the trick. So now I'm ready to start stitching the boning channels. And we have a sleeping puppy. To do the channels, I'm working in a simple back stitch, which is the strongest stitch you can make by hand and also the tidiest. I want these stitches to be as neat and uniform as possible because they're going to be very visible on the front of the bodice, so they can't look sloppy or uneven. When you sew by hand, you'll never manage to get perfect stitches like you do on a machine, but for me, that's part of the beauty of hand sewing. I love to sew by hand because I enjoy taking my time with projects, and I love the simplicity of it. There's no complicated threading of machines or navigating of bobbins, and you're not chained to a tabletop while doing it. I hate sitting in chairs, and hand sewing allows me to sit crisscross applesauce on the floor with a pillow in my lap while I work, which is how I like to be. And it's portable. I can take my work with me wherever I go and do it on the train or at my partner's house or when I visit friends, so I can work while we chat. Sewing by hand means that I don't have to carve out time in my life to go sit at a desk with a machine. I can integrate it into my life, make it part of my day-to-day routine so it becomes something I'm doing almost all of the time. But I digress. I know you didn't ask for this essay on hand sewing, but I hope that it encourages anyone watching this who wants to try sewing but maybe feels intimidated by learning to use a machine. Honestly, same, that's why I've never done it, or can't afford to buy one. You don't need a lot to hand sew. All you need is a needle, some thread, a thimble, a pair of scissors, and an eye for possibilities. I've done one boning channel. You can see it here. I've done these tiny little back stitches, and this is gonna look really cool once the bone is inserted, but basically I have all of these other ones to do. So now that you've seen one done, I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest. It's pretty straightforward. You just back stitch following all the lines, and once those are done, I can cut the bones and insert them. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish this whole bodice, and I will check back in with you guys once all of this has been stitched. Okay, so it is 2 days later, and I have finished the boning channels on the bodice. So here they are. All in, this took about 6 hours spread over the course of 2 days. Of course, you could have done this in 10 minutes on a machine, but we do things slow on this channel. So I've stitched all of the boning channels, and I just went ahead and pressed it to remove all of the lines that I marked in earlier. So we are ready to go and insert the bones. I've already done a couple here down center front just because you can see here where the channels sort of crisscross. I kind of like had to insert these bones before I stitched these channels. So a couple are already done, but I saved the rest so that I could show you on camera how that is done. Also, you'll notice that the edges are fraying like a lot. That is just a consequence of hand sewing because you're handling the fabric a lot more than you would be if you were just putting it through a machine. So what I do to counteract this is I always cut myself a lot more seam allowance than I think I need because I know that it's going to fray this much when you hand sew. So that's how I get around it. I'm not too worried about this because it's all going to get cut off and tucked under. But if you have never hand sewn before and you're just starting to, don't be freaked out by all the fraying edges. That is perfectly normal. Just make sure you leave yourself a lot of extra seam allowance for that reason. All right, this is my synthetic whalebone. I always keep it in my stash. It's not the same thing as like plastic corset boning. This is actually synthetic whalebone, and it's made from nylon and not plastic, and it's made specifically for historical reenactors because it actually mimics like historical baleen and the way that it would have behaved in corsets and stays. So, okay, quick history lesson. So historical stays and corsets were stiffened with a substance called baleen, which came from the jaws of sperm whales, and baleen is made out of keratin, which is the same substance as our fingernails. So what happens with keratin when it's heated up is that it becomes really flexible, which is a property that was really desired for stays and corsets, because what happens is as you wear the corset throughout the day, the heat from your body actually causes the whalebones in the corset to become a lot softer and more flexible and mold to the shape of your body. So that was obviously very desired because it made the corset more comfortable to wear, and it also made it conform to the wearer's body to achieve the desired silhouette, whatever the fashionable silhouette of the time was. So that's why whalebone was used to stiffen stays and corsets so often until about the late 19th, early 20th centuries when steel bones were used in corsets, and they still are in like really high quality corsets today. You'll find steel bones in like sort of those like floppy like Victoria's Secret lingerie corsets. You have plastic boning, which I never use because it doesn't really do anything in my opinion. So that's why I use this stuff, because it's actually made in Germany to mimic the way that baleen would have behaved in historical corsets, and it's much better than like the plastic boning in like cheap corsets that are made by fast fashion brands. It's surprisingly not that expensive. I get mine from Burnley and Trowbridge, which this is not a plug for Burnley and Trowbridge at all. They did not pay me any money for this. I just really love love them. They're a store that's geared towards like historical reenactors and people who make historical clothing. So I always have a roll of this in my stash because I use it for everything. It's what I used in my 18th century stays and in my early 19th century Regency stays. And I'm planning a 1660s gown project with a heavily bone structured bodice that I will also use this for. So it is fantastic. I love it. It is the closest thing that you can get to historical whalebone without actually using like real whalebone. So that's what I'm going to be using in there. Long story short. To insert the bones, I cut a length of boning to match the length of the channel that it's meant for. Then I massage and work the bone through my hands to warm it up, which will make it flexible and easier to bend into shape. Since the channel is straight, I want the bone to be as straight as possible too to help the bodice hold its shape. So as I work it through my hands, I'm also straightening it out and correcting the curve from it being in the roll. When I'm happy with the shape, I take my metal scissors and carefully round off the edges of each end of the bone. This gets rid of any sharp pointy bits that will eventually wear through and poke holes in the fabric if left untrimmed. Then I just slide the bone into the channel and done! Repeat until all the channels are boned. Boning is in and I'm super happy with how this turned out. I love the way this looks. It's already like 1,000 times better. There we go, the lighting's better. It's already like 1,000 times better than the original and it hasn't even been reattached to the skirt yet. So now that the boning is all in, the next step is that I'm going to fold and tuck in and stitch down all of these edges here that are fraying very rapidly, and that will also secure the boning inside the bodice so that it can't go anywhere or slip out. So that is my next order of business, and once that's done, the bodice will be actually done and ready to reattach to the skirt, and this is going actually a lot faster than I thought it would. I'm hemming the bottom first because it's fraying more quickly than the top, so at this point I'm just looking to secure the edges as fast as possible before they disintegrate even more. To do that, I'm just folding over the edge of the fabric twice and then pinning it into place before I actually start sewing. And I'm just going to continue to do this all along the bottom of the bodice before I put even a single stitch in it.
Good tidings we bring to you and your kin.
Once the edges have been pinned down, I'm going in with my 10 sharp needle and stitching them down with a back stitch. Normally I would use a felling stitch for hems like this because it's invisible from the front, but because this hem is also meant to keep the bones in their channels, I want to use an extra strong stitch to make sure it stays in place, so I'm opting for a back stitch instead. As I work, I'm being careful to catch only the 2 layers of lining in my stitches so that they don't poke through to the front of the bodice and the stitches stay invisible from the front. This is another one of those cool things about hand sewing. If I was doing this on a machine right now, the stitches would be going through all the layers of fabric and would be visible from the front, and there would be absolutely nothing I could do about that. But hand sewing allows for so much more delicacy and precision that I have the option to make my stitches completely invisible if I want to, which I do. Okay, so it's like getting towards the end of my workday and I was just like sitting here doing my stuff, and then I all of a sudden, just out of the blue, had this idea to trim the gown with organza instead of like the appliques that I had planned to trim it with. So like I had a whole plan in my head, and I actually bought these like sequin peacock feather applique bits that I was going to add to the skirt. And then last night I was like playing around with the placement and like trying to figure out where I wanted them, and then I couldn't like find a good spot on the skirt for them, and I realized I didn't really like them. So then I thought, oh, I'll just leave it plain and just have like a plain green gown and that'll be fine. And then I was just sitting here like literally 5 minutes ago, and then this image popped into my head of like this chiffon trimming on the gown on like the top here, and then maybe like a little bit of the sleeve. So then of course I had to order some, and this is what it looks like. All right, so this is what I ordered and I'm super excited. I'm going to trim the skirt and the bodice with it and have like little faux sleeves and maybe trim like the top of the bodice, and I'm really excited. It's like an iridescent red and green color, so it'll match the gown really nicely. And I just thought like the red and the green was kind of Christmassy, so not usually a color combo that I would go for, but it just really stood out to me and like I have an instinct about it, so I'm gonna follow that and see how it goes. So anyway, that'll be here next Thursday. So it is Thursday now, so I have to wait a week before that comes in. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is just take my time with this bodice, and then I think like play around with the skirt. Maybe I'll create like a little bustle pad to go on the underside of the skirt to like hold up the back pleat that I'm gonna do. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm not even done the bodice yet. So I was hoping to finish this weekend, but that looks like it's not gonna happen. So I'm gonna have to wait until next Thursday. So I guess you're all gonna have to wait another week for this video to come out. I don't know, I'm just rambling right now. I gotta get back to work. And we have a finished bodice. Yay. I am so happy with how this turned out. It's still not 100% finished because when the organza that I ordered shows up sometime next week, I'm going to add a little bit to the top here, kind of like in Cinderella's gown in like the 2015 Disney remake, just like some organza puffs along the top. And I still have to fit the bodice, which I'm going to do right now because as it stands, it's still too big. So it's probably going to end up being cut off like here on either end, but I'm going to just do a quick fitting and see how much I need to take off of each side here. And yeah, then it's pretty much done and I can move on to the skirt. Woohoo! Oh, and also just want to show you the inside. I pride myself on the insides of my garments being almost as nice looking as the outsides. That's a particular sticking point with me. I like the insides to be neat and tidy, so I'm really proud of myself for like how neat and clean this came out. I still have to add some padding to the boob cups because mine are not this size, so I have to pad that out quite a bit, but I'm getting some cotton wadding tomorrow and I'm going to use that to like pad this out. So that'll be like the last structural element that I add to this before it's really done, and then I can move on to the skirt tomorrow. Yay. Okay, I'm going to attempt to do this with one hand without flashing you, but as you can see, there's a lot of room here where these two sides overlap. So I think I'm actually going to trim this back on either side almost right. Oh, sorry, the lighting is also terrible. There we go. I'm going to trim it back almost right to where those bones come out on either side. And then I'll leave a little bit of, come on, focus. Or, okay, there we go. And then I will leave a little bit of, oh, the lighting is terrible. I'm so sorry. Ugh, what do I do? Okay, this is so hard, you guys. Okay, this is why I don't like filming tutorials. Okay, so I'm gonna leave a little bit of seam allowance here for the zipper to go, and that's probably sufficient. So I can't actually hem this yet because obviously the zipper has to go in, and that's gonna be like the very last thing I do. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to trim it down and I'll pin it and make sure it fits, and then we're gonna move on to the skirt. Okay, so here's the bodice pinned on, and I'm so happy with how this turned out. Ignore the bloating. I'm about to get my period. That's TMI, but I don't care. Women have periods, deal with it. So yeah, no notes. I'm super happy. Whenever that chiffon comes in next week, I'm gonna just pin it around the top, and it's going to be like kind of a floofy, like drapey, iridescent sheer bit on top here, and then I'm gonna have some in the skirt obviously. But yeah, guys, so much better than it was before. Yeah. Hi. I did not intend to have this video be in 2 parts. My original intention was just to like do the entire tutorial and then post the whole thing as one video. But my footage was already over an hour long and I hadn't even filmed myself like attaching the dress and putting on the organza yet, or like doing the outro, and it was already at like an hour and 15 minutes. So I thought that's a little long for like a tutorial video. Part 2 will be coming to you sometime next week, and in part 2 I'm going to be doing like the bustle pad, attaching the bodice to the skirt, and then putting the like padding inside of the boob cups that I talked about like earlier in this video. And I will also be attaching the organza layers and just putting the finishing touches on this dress. And I will also be doing the big reveal at the end of part 2. My hope with filming this tutorial is that I want to inspire you to maybe look at your clothes that you already have in your closet, or go to a thrift store and look at them with fresh eyes, and maybe instead of like buying that new thing, looking at what you already have and seeing how you can upcycle it. As a society, we throw out a lot of clothing that doesn't need to be thrown out, and I think we really have lost the art of like remaking and upcycling our clothing. In the past, especially in like the late 18th century, it was really, really common to have your dresses remade. So when you got married as a woman, you would have your wardrobe done, and then as you went through your life, you would take your dresses to a seamstress or a man-to-a-maker, and she would upcycle them. She would remake them into the latest styles, but it was the same fabric, the same dress, and it would be remade over and over and over again until it was literally just rags. Then you would use up the scraps of fabric and other things, and people did this even when they were wealthy. Fabric was such a precious commodity in the past, and we treat it like it's something disposable in our modern society, and it's not. It still is a precious commodity. Textile production is no joke. Like, trust me, guys, I just took a whole course on like textile conservation and preservation, and I know how much work goes into both the production and the preservation of fabric. And we really are doing ourselves and our planet a disservice by throwing away the amount of clothing that we throw away. So if there's anyone out there who has maybe wanted to learn sewing but has been intimidated by it, I hope this video also inspires you to just like pick up a needle and thread and a thimble and just go at it. I have been sewing every single day for exactly 3 years. I started my first project in November of 2020, and I have been sewing every day without fail. Rain, shine, sickness, health, doesn't matter, every day for the last 3 years, even if it's just like 5 stitches a day, because that's all I have the time or energy for. I have not let a single day go by where I didn't put a stitch in something for the last 3 years. So it is something that I have dedicated myself to. I'm not an expert by any means. I am self-taught, but that's the beauty of platforms like YouTube. We can teach each other and learn from one another. And that's how I learned everything I know about sewing. I learned because people on this platform took the time to film their process, explain what they were doing. I owe my favorite hobby to those people and those videos. So this is my way of sort of giving back and contributing to that conversation. And I feel like I can do that now after like all of the practice that I've had and like the years that I've dedicated to this. When I first started out sewing, I thought I was just going to do that one project and that was it, but it became something really addictive that I just couldn't stop doing. And 3 years in, I still love it just as much as I did in the beginning. And in fact, I love it more because the more I learn, the more fascinated I become by it. And the more skills I pick up, the more I want to pick up. And it's become just this like thing that I have this consistent hunger for. And it's definitely been like my longest running hobby like ever in my whole life, for sure. I've just really dedicated myself to this for whatever reason. I don't know why this stuck the way that it did, but I'm very grateful that it did. And I'm super grateful to all of those people on YouTube who taught me how to sew. I hope that if you take away anything from this video, it's that you don't have to like enroll in expensive sewing classes and buy an expensive machine to make beautiful things. All you need is like your 2 hands, a thimble, some thread that you can just go to the dollar store and buy. And it takes a little bit of dedication. Hand sewing takes a lot more patience than a machine does, for sure. Things take longer this way, but you have more control, it's more precise, and I love hand sewing. I think I explained that in this video, how much I love hand sewing and why. But I just wanted to show you that like it's not something that you have to spend a lot of money on or even a lot of time on. I mean, like 5 minutes a day practicing is all you really need to like get good at hand sewing. Like once you learn the stitches, you just practice them a few times and like really that's it. That's all you need to know. And once you know those like few basic stitches, you can apply that like right across the board. And you can see from this tutorial, like I applied a bunch of historical techniques to this modern upcycling project that I've just picked up over the years that I've been doing this. So like the more you do it, the more you kind of train your eye to look at projects and think, okay, what are the steps that I'm going to do this project in? What order am I going to do these steps in? How am I going to bring this to life? And what techniques, what stitches am I going to use in this garment? And the more you do it, the better you get at like determining those things. But if you're new to sewing, if you've never done a project before and maybe like you've been curious about it, like I would encourage you, just literally go to the dollar store, pick up a needle and thread and a thimble. Don't forget the thimble. That's super, super important. Like your fingers will die without a thimble, I promise. But just go pick one up, see what happens. Like put a few stitches in a piece of cloth. Like it doesn't have to be anything elaborate or complicated. And just see, like you can really do some magic with just like a few basic simple tools. When I first started sewing, I was really intimidated by the whole process of it. And I kept thinking like, who am I to like do this? Like, you know, like what, maybe I should take a class, maybe I should get a machine, and like all those things that like modern people will tell you, like this is what you need to start sewing. And then one day I just had this thought, sewing machines weren't even invented until the 1790s. And before that, there was like literally thousands of years of human history where everything was sewn by hand, by candlelight, without electricity or running water or the internet to like check how to do something. And like if our ancestors could make these absolutely beautiful garments, and if our ancestors could make these absolutely beautiful, intricate, and complicated garments with just a needle and thread in like a darkly lit room without electricity, surely I, as a modern person with access to Google, can also do the same thing, right? So that was the thought that kept me going through all of those times that I felt like giving up. So if you are just starting out, don't give up. If our ancestors could do it, you can do it too. You have running water and electricity and the internet, and you have things that they didn't have. You can figure this out, I promise. So thanks to everyone who watched this video all the way to the end. I super appreciate you. And part 2 will be coming to you probably next weekend sometime. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe. Show this video some love. I'm so close to my goal of 1,000 subscribers, but it really would help the channel out if you would just like hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Let me know what you're working on, and I will see you in the next one. Toodaloo.
Wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas.